Huberman. Now, in all fairness to the scientific literature, there are not one, not two, not three, but four prominent theories of which brain networks are most activated during a psilocybin or other psychedelic journey. And so for those of you that are interested in those different models, first of all, please know that they are not competing models. While some of them disagree about some of the details, it's very likely that all of these models are true. They include things like changes in the so-called default mode network. There's a lot of interest in this. I've talked about it before on this podcast. The default mode network is the network in the brain that's thought to be responsible for spontaneous imagination, for daydreaming, and that reflects sort of the base activation state of the brain when there's no drugs in our system. And the default mode network is one of the systems, or networks rather, that is thought to be rewired under conditions of psilocybin or other psychedelics. Again, if you're interested in these models and comparing and contrasting them, there's a very nice review from Brian Roth's lab at Duke entitled The Neural Basis of Psychedelic Action. We'll provide a link to this in the show note captions. And again, I just want to emphasize that all of these models have been shown to be true in different studies. And what they all point to is more extensive communication between areas of the brain that normally are not as active at the same time while under the influence of psychedelics such as psilocybin. The controversy in the field relates to which of these networks is the one that changes the most to explain the therapeutic outcomes that have been discovered in recent years. So again, check out that review if you're interested in that sort of thing. In the meantime, we can cut a broad swath through all of those models and just say that psilocybin expands the functional connectivity of the brain while one is under the influence of psilocybin. And it does seem that some of that expanded functional connectivity persists after the effects of psilocybin have worn off. And that statement about the functional connectivity of the brain being more expanded, not just during the psilocybin session, but after as well, has been substantiated in a number of papers. But one of the key papers in this area is one that I recommend people check out if they're interested in this sort of thing, is entitled The Effects of Psilocybin and MDMA on Between Network Resting State Functional Connectivity in Healthy Volunteers. And I like this paper for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a very high quality paper carried out in the laboratory of Robin Carhart-Harris at UCSF. Again, one of the premier researchers in this area of psychedelics and their function, what they do in the brain, and also their therapeutic applications, but also because it focused on healthy volunteers. They explored, using brain imaging, what brain areas are active in a resting state, so things like default mode network. Then they had people take psilocybin or MDMA, and then they looked at the connectivity between those brain areas in those same individuals when they were not under the influence of these drugs and found more extensive connectivity, all of which pointed to an enhanced lateral connectivity, less hierarchical organization, effectively more interconnection and communication between different brain areas. I think not only is the fact that they looked at healthy volunteers very interesting and important, but also that they looked at this resting state of the brain. They weren't providing a particular auditory or visual stimulus for people to hear or look at while they were in the brain imaging scanner, as it's called. Rather, they were simply looking at how the brain was behaving at rest. And so it's very clear that for people that do 2 or even just 1 of these psilocybin journeys at a particular dose, that the brain is actually getting rewired. You know, we hear this a lot. Psilocybin or other psychedelics lead to plasticity. They rewire your brain. Well, let's go back to what we said at the beginning. Rewiring of the brain is not the goal. Adaptive rewiring of the brain is the goal, right? Rewiring that leads to new ideas that are interesting, that are accessible after the psychedelic journey, new ideas and new ways of thinking or feeling that allow people to function better in their lives. That's the goal of effective psychedelic therapies, not simply rewiring of the brain. You know, a brain injury for that matter will lead to rewiring of the brain, but that's maladaptive rewiring. The use of things like amphetamines or methamphetamines in particular will lead to rewiring of the brain, but that is strongly maladaptive rewiring. So now there are really dozens of studies conducted in humans using brain imaging and other techniques have evaluated how things like psilocybin change connectivity in the brain. And I think the take-home message is it expands that connectivity. However, it seems to do so in ways that still allow people to function in their daily lives. And one of the key things that I gleaned from the literature on the therapeutic use of psilocybin for the treatment of depression is that very seldom do people who take psilocybin experience long-term issues with memory. Why is that so critical? Well, you could imagine that increasing connectivity in the brain, reducing modularity, reducing hierarchical organization of the brain would lead to disruptions in memory, right? It's as if you're shuffling books on the bookshelf, so to speak. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Rather, it seems that the increase in connectivity is leading, provided set and setting are correct, provided safety protocols are followed, to positive rewiring or adaptive rewiring of neural tissue. So that's one of the things that makes psychedelics and psilocybin in particular very exciting from the therapeutic standpoint. And of course, we have to acknowledge it's also what has a lot of people excited about psychedelics, not just for the treatment of depression, but for expanding the brain's capabilities more